for our pre-council meeting, and we'll turn it over to our Public Works Department.
All right. Good afternoon, Chairman Christensen and members of the council. I know you're excited to hear about this. We're going to talk about solid waste today. And it's always exciting and good. But it is an interesting thing. It's interesting timing. It's kind of ironic. We're on the advent of a major recycling initiative, and here I am before you to talk about siting our next landfill. So it's an interesting topic for us to talk about. Even though we're about 10 plus years away from full capacity at our existing site, it's time to look at the future and ensure that the site to the east of us is approved for solid waste operations. Most of us have always assumed that city-owned land would be used for this purpose, but this is the process that actually formalized it. So the siting approval process that we go through that's required by state statute includes a number of things. First of all, this is not required, but it's certainly something where we want to talk to you about how we go through this. We have a pre-council briefing, a notification of landowners near the proposed sites. Now, there's about 41 parcels of land around our current landfill. A number of those are owned by the city of Lincoln. A couple are owned by LES, a couple owned by Game and Parks. But we do need to notify all of those landowners of this siting approval. After we will introduce a resolution before you to approve this site for use as solid waste operations. And of course, we have a public hearing associated with that where any of the landowners or anyone else can come in and discuss this. This will either be approved or denied, and if approved, then we would do an application with our permit for the Bluff Road landfill that's existing and do them in combination for both sites. Just a little background on Bluff Road. It was opened in 1988. It's a Subtitle D municipal solid waste landfill, which means it's under a number of regulations that our other landfill is not. It includes liners, of course, to protect the groundwater. It includes gas extraction and capture, and it has leachate capture as well. And of course, it's owned and operated by the city of Lincoln. We also have a 48th Street landfill that's owned and operated by the city of Lincoln. It was the first permit for construction and demolition waste was in 1994. But before that, it was a full-blown landfill. It does not have a liner. It does not have leachate collection, and does not have gas collection. And I'm going to list here a whole bunch of the other operations that currently are underway in these two sites. Obviously, the landfill, we have composting also with our yard waste material. That composting area is not permitted. It just takes yard waste, so it's not required to be permitted. Gas collection system, we take our gas and we send it to LES to produce electricity. And on North 48th Street, we have a number of things going on right now, including the new hazardous materials collection center that we've just taken occupancy of, which will be open, I think, sometime later this fall. And of course, we have a number of other operations associated with solid waste management in Lincoln. So we've, about 3 years ago, we put together the Solid Waste Management Plan 2040. And in it, we knew that our disposal and processing capacity would be exhausted during the time frame between now and 2040. And right now, if you look at our financial statements, they indicate how long that our landfill will be available to receive waste, have the capacity to receive waste. And the last one that we put out said that we had approximately 16 years at Bluff Road landfill. We've got approximately 12 years of capacity for construction and demolition waste at the 48th Street landfill.
Donna, I'm sorry, 16 years from now, or?
16 years from 2016, that was the date of our last financial statement, so 2032. But we are looking at the waste coming to the landfill over the last year, and we're estimating that that's probably not quite right. It's probably a little bit less than that. So we're thinking we're about 10 years out from full capacity of the landfill, and it's time to start working on this siting approval. In some places, this has taken as long as 10 years to get siting approval for an area, and we want to make sure that this land is insured to be there for the capacity of landfilling.
So just to clarify, do you mean 2027 or 2026?
In terms of,
When you'll have capacity, reach capacity at Bluff Road?
okay, the financial statement that we did last year when we did our calculations, it's officially documented, said we had 16 years from 2016, so that would be 2032. But the numbers that we're seeing, because we're having a lot more waste going to the landfill right now, it looks like it's about 2028.
2028. And what would be the year for the other, for North 48th?
12 years from 2016, and we haven't recalculated that capacity yet.
Do you have any idea why there's increased disposal?
Well, our preliminary estimates that we did looks at a number of things. Obviously, there's been some demolitions and things, and of course, the damage that we've had during storms. But what you look at over the history, when you see an uptick in the economic environment, for some reason, we throw more things away. And that has definitely happened. And if you follow the trends in the economy over the years, you'll see that uptick a lot. So we think that a lot of this is due to that particular going on right now. In fact, it outpaces what we estimated for our recycling savings that we were hoping to see from the cardboard recycling ban. We are going to be asking you to pass a resolution granting this siting approval and to expand and secure the capacity. Bluff Road would be the parcel to the east, and you have two maps in front of you, I believe. One is for Bluff Road landfill, one is for 48th Street. And the Bluff Road shows the parcel to the east that was purchased as part of the Bluff Road initial development, but only the western portion of it was permitted as a landfill. So now we're looking to permit the other portion of that section to the east. The North 48th Street, we're looking at a portion to the south. Now that is part of the old landfill, and we use our construction and demolition debris to actually cap that landfill to keep it from having stormwater go through the old garbage that was put in there. So this would not be on a new portion of land, it would still be part of the old landfill that's there. And these are just pictures of the same maps that you have in front of you. And if you'll take a look at those maps, I'm going to see if I can. You'll see there's a blue line around it. We're looking at permitting that whole entire site now, instead of just the site that's circled in orange on the western side where Bluff Road exists. And this is a picture of 48th Street. We'd be looking at this, sadly enough, it's in green on green, but it's the area just to the right and lower portion of your map there in front of you. So why do we want to do this now? It's kind of, like I said, it's early. It sounds early anyway, but we need to assure that this capacity is there for us for the future needs of Lincoln and Lancaster County. And it also provides us with some efficiency going forward. We can obtain the permits in the most efficient method possible by doing this all together. And then it would come up in every 5-year renewals, and we could see what happens out there in the industry. There may be other things we wish to do with that land or whatever in the future, but at least it's something that we have the site approval to go forward with solid waste operations on that site. And we feel we've had some very good public involvement with this in the past. As I said, 3 years ago, there was an 18-member panel, basically, that reviewed our solid waste management in the city of Lincoln. It was thoroughly vetted with a number of public meetings at that time, and it was recommended as part of that plan to secure this area as our future solid waste management site. So we're looking at what the resolution would actually look like. I'm showing it here, and I think the biggest part to pay attention here is the last line. We'll be looking at having this area suitable for a solid waste disposal area and/or a solid waste processing facility. And there's an important distinction here. with actually listing it this way. So because we're actually asking for siting approval for either or I should say both, a solid waste disposal area and a solid waste processing facility, this is a little bit different than what we would normally put before you. And I want to talk about the definitions of those two things. And it's very important to understand what they are and what we're actually asking for. Under state statute, a solid waste disposal area includes all of these things that you see in front of you right now. Municipal solid waste, construction demolition waste, industrial waste, delisted hazardous waste, fossil fuel combustion ash, and land application units for special wastes. And it has a but not limited to, but those would have to be approved under the regulations at DEQ. And a solid waste processing facility includes these items: a compost site, material recovery facilities, such as a recycling recovery facility where you'd actually recover recyclables, recycling centers, transfer stations, and again, the but not limited to statement in state statute. The interesting part about this is we have currently a composting site on that area right now that's not permitted. It just takes yard waste. If we ever want to expand that to food waste and things of that nature to compost, we would need to permit it. And this gives us the flexibility to do either a solid waste processing facility or use that area for disposal. And that's basically what I just said, so I got the next slide taken care of here. So the choices are lateral expansion of Bluff Road landfill or permitting of an organic waste composting facility, which is something we'd like to do. And NDEQ requires local siting approval prior to permitting either of these areas, either a disposal area or processing facility. And the siting approval is required by state statute. It must meet these criteria. And this is kind of an interesting set of criteria. We must demonstrate that the proposed site is necessary to the community, designed, located, and operated to protect the public health, safety, and welfare, compatible with the character of the surrounding area and will have no significant effect on property value. Operating plan will minimize danger from fires, spills, and other operational accidents, and it must be designed to minimize impacts on existing traffic flow. Now you might ask, well, you're going to have to make the decision on the siting approval. How will you know if any of this is going to actually occur? We have hired HDR. They will put together a report for you, and you'll have all that information before that resolution comes before you. We also have to kind of say something about our current operations at Bluff Road to meet the last two bullet points that are up there. We currently do operate a successful site there and that is safe and effective for taking care of disposal of our materials from Lincoln and Lancaster County. So again, this is just a real quick briefing to tell you what's coming up. We anticipate that resolution to be introduced probably it has to be at least 14 days from today. I'm sorry, 14 days from the time that we send the letters out to the landowners. So it'll be a couple weeks or 3 weeks down the road yet before we introduce it. But we wanted to let you know it's coming and why we're doing it so early and what we're asking for. So if there's any questions, Carla Welding's here, our superintendent of solid waste, to answer anything, and I can help out too.
Start with Carl and then go Cindy and John.
Okay,
Share them over here.
thanks, Donna. So the new site on Bluff Road it looks on the map like it's similar size to what we have currently.
I believe they just split the section, so.
Okay. And so what we have currently looks like it will last about 40 years. But with increased usage in later years, so estimated length of time that this site would meet our needs.
It depends on how much waste diversion we do in the future, so yes.
Then what happens to the existing landfill?
The existing landfill will be capped, and when it's at capacity, it will be capped with either a a membrane that's made out of some water-resistant plastic-type membrane, or we're testing an alternative capping now with a deeper soil level and certain plants that can extract that water so it doesn't get to the garbage. But we will continue to extract gas from that area. Those wells will continue. And the leachate, anything that goes through that will still be extracted after that as well. So we'll have to take care of it. We have a 30-year commitment it's regulatorily required to take care of that, and probably groundwater monitoring into perpetuity.
And the cost of closing that one, and then the cost of opening the new one?
The cost of closing, I think we had in our budget, and I don't know if I can quote that exactly right now, but it's fairly sizable, approximately 16 million to finish.
16?
16,
Okay.
to finish the capping. And Carla, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if that's about right.
Those are in current year
Yeah.
estimates, so that will escalate
10
as
years, yeah.
inflation threshold.
The cost of opening the new landfill, about 10 million. Again, current dollars.
Thank you.
Cindy?
Thanks, Donna. When you presented us with what the resolution would be, and you talked about the language that included both the processing, the disposal area and the processing facility, would this be the same type of resolution for the 48th Street location?
I don't know, it would not be. And, excuse me, I'm getting too close to that. Right now, I don't think that, we've actually asked DEQ if we need to do a siting approval for 48th. We're telling you about it right now, but it may not be necessary since it's over the existing landfill that's there. So we may not need to do a siting approval since that's part of the old landfill anyway. But if we do, it would be for construction and demolition waste.
Thank you.
John?
Yes, first I want to pick up on what Carl was talking about on the costs and so forth. Can you relate the 16 million to close and 10 to open to what you've been accumulating reserves, if any, and with your fees and so forth?
We actually just started the process of saving for that with this last budget cycle. It was one of the things we specifically requested in the budget that was passed this last biennium. And I'm trying to remember what the amount was we put away for each year. Do you recall, Carla?
Per year, no, I don't off the top. I know Cindy's still trying to work with finance to ensure that we have that locked down very solid.
Mm-hmm. So we have it was estimated so that we were ramped up enough to be able to have that money available when that time came in 2032 at the time, because that's what we were basing our numbers on for closure. And I'd have to look, John, at how much we were actually putting together each year.
I would think for preparation of the new one, there's something in there to
Mm-hmm.
start building that. I don't think you quite answered the way I would like to hear your answer on how long the new landfill will last. You said, it depends on recycling and so forth. What is, based upon current conditions and so forth, your projection of this new landfill?
And Carla, I don't know if you could help me out there with regard to that.
One of the things in
Why don't you introduce yourself too?
I'm sorry, I'm Carla Welding, I'm the superintendent of solid waste operations, so I'm the division manager for solid waste management. One of the things in determining capacity for a landfill is you first have to determine what your site conditions are. So what comes first? Trying to determine what your site conditions are, your depth to groundwater, essentially. Because you don't want to dig it so deep that you're digging into, and there's actually a regulatory requirement of separation of waste from your groundwater. And you can engineer your way out of that. Obviously, there's many states that are at water level, and they engineer their way out of that. So our decision was, what do you do first? Do you do all of that characterization and go through all of the design and the computations to get the answer to that question? Or do we seek the approval to make sure the site is essentially declared to be available for that use? and then go through that. So we kind of balance that. We are doing some hydrogeo characterization right now to ensure that we can in fact design that, but we have not done that complete design to figure out the depth, the height, the lateral extent of that new facility. And then once you know that, the engineering statistics related to it, then you pick up on what year you intend to begin consuming capacity, what your population is that's contributing to the consumption of that capacity, and then how many pounds per person per day people are throwing away. And then we can calculate years. So it might be fair to say we would expect it to be relatively the same as what the existing Bluff Road landfill is, but boy, there's a lot of engineering yet that has to be done to pin it down to a specific number of years.
Okay, we have 10 minutes
So
left.
what is your best guesstimate, best estimate?
Well, again, today, I would say roughly the same number of years as the existing, so we would go from roughly 1990 to 2030,
So 40 years.
40 years.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 10 minutes left, so Marion and then Benny has no questions? Okay.
So, are there costs associated with just the site approval process in terms of permits and other costs?
There are, the permit process, not the site approval process, but the permitting process is $7,500 per application.
How many are there?
In terms of,
Are you're saving money by doing them all at once, is that
Right,
right?
that's
How
correct.
so, just by getting today's costs as opposed to future costs? Or
This
is there
would be-
actually an efficiency in dollars as well as time?
we do a permit application every 5 years, so this is just a matter of us, once we have the site approval, we can do the whole area at once for this permit.
And do you have a sense of what's driving the accelerated timeline for getting ready for a new landfill? I mean,
It's more of a, it was a recommendation of the solid waste management plan that we assure that this property is set aside and approved for this use. So we just want to make sure that it's there and we can move forward with it. There's no real other reason than that. And that if we do, if worse comes to worse and this site is not approved for this use, we would have to go look for another site. And that, seeking out another site for a landfill is not an easy task.
can't imagine.
So 10 years is not too soon to start this process.
But didn't you say you thought that it would need to close earlier than projected? Isn't that a driving factor as well, or is?
It could be. I mean, it seriously could be, but right now, we haven't got, those are just estimated numbers for this year. From last year, we still are looking at 2032 from the actual official calculations that we do at the end of each year.
So clearly the advantages with this site are that you already own the property, is that correct?
That's correct.
And siting somewhere else would be a lengthy process. And do you have other thoughts? And I mean, if for some reason this didn't get approved, do you have locations in mind, or is that even something you've talked about?
We do not have other locations in mind, and we do know that in other counties in the state, there has been, it's taken 10 years to get a site approved. So it's not, that's really just the reason we're doing it now, is to assure that we have that property designated as a solid waste operations area.
Are there disadvantages with this site that you see? I mean,
I don't believe so.
No, none at all. And there are other things that, of course, make this site contiguous, although the waste wouldn't be contiguous, make it attractive. One is, we would use the current infrastructure. So you already have a gatehouse, you already have a maintenance building, you already have a scale or scales. By the time you build this one, you already have some investments in site fencing and things like that. So being next door has some pretty significant advantages.
So I've got one question I'd like to follow up with. You're talking about current infrastructure that we have in place. Right now, we do have a facility where we capture methane
Correct, yes.
and produce natural gas that we use. Are we going to extend that east on Bluff Road, or are we going to create a new facility next to it? What's the implications there for continuing that operation and the costs?
The new site that we're talking about, once it becomes a landfill, would have to have wells in it, just like we currently have at Bluff Road, that would extract the methane from the landfill. We might need more infrastructure for cleaning and things of that nature, but we'd use the facilities that we have there, I would guess, now.
Okay.
And they would actually, under current proposed regulations, be accelerated. So there's regulations before EPA under the Clean Air Act to essentially have the emission threshold that triggers the need to install gas extraction wells.
Carl?
Thank you.
Wait,
Has there been any, have you looked at any communities that have had the emerald ash borer problem, and has that waste gone to the landfill? Has that impacted?
I think so.
The wood waste from emerald ash borer does not require landfilling. So the general plan, forestry, parks and rec will have a bigger role in this than solid waste will, but the general plan will be to chip that or reuse it as boards.
Okay, good.
Okay. Last one. Where'd he go?
Aside from recycling efforts that have been discussed at length, are there other initiatives or operations that you're undertaking to try and mitigate and push out the date when you actually have to build the landfill? Are there other things that you have in mind to do?
Well, part of, I think the solid waste management plan listed a number of things, but part of what I discussed here about the processing facility at the compost area, if we could take some more organic materials, that would be food waste and things of that nature. Obviously, we have private enterprise that does that now. We're not planning to interfere with that. But certainly if we can augment that in any way in terms of helping out with that, that would be a place to do it if we could have that permit and ready to go for that type of enterprise.
And you said you're designing potentially the new landfill to accommodate that use.
Correct.
Thank you.
And you still have time?
Yep.
A couple of months ago, you acted on some legislation or a resolution for us which allowed us to put the asphalt shingles into the C&D landfill as opposed to consuming space at the Bluff Road landfill.
Right.
That's an action that's already been taken that essentially is consuming incredible amounts of volume or airspace at our C&D landfill, but is conserving that more expensive space at the Bluff Road landfill, the lined and capped and monitored and more environmentally managed landfill.
Okay. So just to cap off, one last question. I think I'll finish with this. You said we have approximately another 10 years in here. Now, somewhere in my mind, I got this idea that this was supposed to last till 2040. Was that never a thing, or?
I don't believe that. I think when the Solid Waste Management Plan 2040 came out, we knew at that time that it was not going to make it to the end of that planning period.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Welcome. And we'll begin our next meeting in about, 2 minutes.